Okay, welcome to another edition of Rise Up with Marc Mixon. If everything is going well, this will be our second live stream edition, and the first time we post a live stream as a full episode. I just sort of clicked over on things. It looks to me like we're streaming to both YouTube and Rumble right now. Is that what it's
Yes.
looking like to you, Adam?
So it looks like to me. Yep, absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Success on the tech front. Well, good morning, Adam. How are you today, sir?
Other than frustrated
about tech. Oh, well, it's we don't have the dollars, we don't have the corporate sponsorships, we don't have the funds to like have a tech team behind the scenes helping us do this. It's just Adam and I, and sometimes things get a little complex. So
true.
I don't know if it's I don't know if the live streams are saying what the topic today was, or if it just says live stream. Adam, any idea there?
No, I put up a description.
Fantastic. Great.
Yeah. Right now we're doing we're covering Robert Kennedy Jr.'s withdrawal and other topics regarding the upcoming election.
Cool. All right. Well, I hope we can keep it more or less to RFK Jr. this time. We've only ever given him some sort of in-passing commentary, and I think when we release this as an episode on the podcast world, and if you happen to be a Rumble or YouTube subscriber, you may get this about a week early, because this is live right this second, and we don't tend to post our episodes until Friday mornings. So you'll get this about early. But when we post it, I think that the title will be "Was He Always an Op?" And I want to talk about this. Adam, you watched. You maybe even you watched it live. You watched. I've watched it now. I did not watch it on the day, but you watched his about 45-minute speech where he withdrew from the race. Yeah, were you watching that live? Were you one of the
not live?
viewers?
No, I heard about it after. I think I caught it about an hour after he had put it up, before he had done the live.
All right.
Stream.
Well, let's say you were a Kennedy supporter early on. I don't know if you had maybe shifted away from that a little bit, and at this point, I guess it doesn't matter. But what were your thoughts as a potential and intrepid Kennedy supporter?
Let me see here. Well, first of all, I know I can bring it up on my phone. I've had some technical issues today with emails wanting me to verify a bunch of shit. So let me go into my sent mail. I sent you an email about
You did
what I wrote underneath his video, and I can share that with the audience today. So first, a little bit of a backstory. I was raised a Republican, or at least within a Republican family, and didn't really have any reason to question that kind of way of thinking as a kid, as most people don't. And then as I got out into the world and started doing things for myself and going to college and getting jobs and all of that, I started to favor the Democrats' side of things. Certainly, I'm more of a liberal-minded person, I think, in my old age than I was when I was younger, and probably more of a liberal than most major party Democrats are. And I think you and I have bonded over that way of thinking over the years. And as most people, I am pretty disillusioned with the way our politics have gone in my lifetime, and really even before. And I think it would be a very healthy, positive thing for the country to have a third choice, whether it be truly a third party or just an independent that runs and wins the presidency. I liked Robert Kennedy Jr.'s stump speeches for the most part. Much of what he had to say I thought was a lot more appropriate and frankly refreshing to the debate over anything I've heard from Trump, and at the time, what I was hearing from Biden. And we never put that episode out, but we watched the debate and commented real time on Trump and Biden. And then I actually caught a video that Kennedy had done a side by side debate with them to kind of answer the same questions and give his 2 cents. And I really thought, in today's political climate, he was one of the only people that was speaking on policy and talking about what he felt could be done for the various things that kind of plague our country. And I didn't think he was a perfect candidate by any means. I certainly didn't think that he was a carbon copy of his father, which I really wish we had had a chance to have a Bobby Kennedy presidency instead of him being taken out. But with all of that being said, Kennedy has disappointed me on quite a few occasions in the last 6, 7 months, mostly just due to the things that he either believes or the kind of ridiculous behavior that he exhibits, both in his past and his very past and his recent past. One being that, he was the gentleman who put a dead baby bear carcass in Central Park and created quite a bit of a media storm around that about who did it and why. And it turned out it was him. Had a hard time believing his story, especially the part where he goes, "Oh, other people that I was with were drinking, not me. And we decided to do this prank." I call bullshit on that. I think he's pretty much known to be a substance abuser, and I wouldn't be shocked if he was still doing those things, 10 years or so ago. And then, of course, all the way to the revelation that he had an assistant that worked with his family that he sexually assaulted, and he did not deny it. In fact, he sent text messages to her apologizing for his behavior because he was a different man then. And but in my head, I'm thinking, well, most likely Biden and Trump, well, we know Trump is, and most likely Biden is as well. These people are kind of cut from the same cloth. They're all awful men and and have done awful things. And when the choices are limited, where are you supposed to look? And I don't believe in a country that can thrive on making no choice at all. So Kennedy was my pick when Biden was still running, because I would never choose Trump. And for anybody watching, I think I try to be pretty clear-headed about why I don't support someone like Donald Trump. He is not a good person, number one. And on top of that, I don't care for the way that he's had his businesses. I don't care for the way he treats human beings, let alone women. And I think that he really knows nothing about the job of president to do it effectively or to make the kind of changes that I would like to see made. And I think that he's a wannabe dictator, someone that would rather have his way at all times, and someone who should not be in power with kind of all of the powers that the executive branch affords nowadays to the president. So Kennedy was a more sobering choice for me out of the three. And of course, I think that, Kennedy lost a lot of support from the right when Trump was almost assassinated. And I think he pulled people back into the fold from that event. And then I think that when Kamala took over for Biden, I think he lost quite a few supporters that were saying, like me, I just can't vote for Biden in his current state. And now the people that are left over are most likely disgruntled Republicans that are unsure of Trump and disgruntled Democrats that are unsure of Kamala. But I doubt that means they're going to be voting for Trump. So he has now decided to put his support in for Donald and drop out of the race. And my response to his video, very long-winded way of getting here, but my response to the video is because I saw a lot of people had commented, mostly they were Republican supporters that I suspect were already on board with Trump. But I just said, so what are Trump's policies? And I started with that because he was saying that the Democrats' policies are dangerous for this country and for the world and all these things. And I'm thinking, well, what are Trump's? And what did he bring to the debate or the interviews he's done to share with the American people what he wants to do if elected for a second term? Yeah, and this is what I wrote to him. I said, "You seem to be solely upset with the Democrats because of how they treated you, but willing to look the other way at the same behavior that the Republicans promote." So stifling the ability for him to run effectively. Are we really living in a democracy? All of that. I would say both sides use the law and other means to gain an advantage to win. So I don't think that that is unique to the Democrats. How have either party truly put the American people first over the past 30 plus years, other than to say the other side is the problem and then continuing to be the problem all on their own? Your endorsement of Trump has come only because Harris's campaign did not grant you a place in their possible future government. In fact, he reached out to her and she didn't respond at all. This is a power play and it's disgusting. You placate the right to install yourself within the system, a system you said needed reform by your leadership, not from you following along with the same old outcome. Republican or Democrat will still be in the same place as before. This is the saddest result you could bring to the people that believed in you, and you yourself are now a joke. A pawn to the establishment and to a man who has no understanding of the job he covets and no ability to change the system, as you've stated is your goal. You speak of how your uncle and father would feel about the Dems today, but how would they feel about you? Something tells me that your siblings have a good idea, which is why they haven't supported you from the beginning. You may talk a good game and have a greater understanding of what this country is truly suffering from, but your ego turns out to be more important to you than the country itself. And I would have added that, just his track record alone on climate justice is destroyed now with his support of a man who not only doesn't believe in it, but is doing his level best when he was president and now what he says he'll do if he's president again, to roll back all of those regulations and all of those things that are trying to be put in place to mitigate the disaster that's awaiting us. So that's really how I feel. He was one of the best options outside of the two that we always get. And now he has decided to fold himself into one of them. And frankly, I most likely would have had a pretty scathing response to him joining Harris as well. But it's quite hypocritical to join a Donald Trump administration, that's for sure.
I mean, I certainly find it fascinating. And I'll tell you in part why. I have, in my circles, seen people claiming that he's always been in the pocket for Donald Trump, that
Right.
I've seen people claiming months ago that he would drop out a few months before the election. And, it felt to me like, I know he started in the Democratic Party, and I think I've said this on this podcast, that in 2023, he seemed to be pulling most of his votes from Democrats. And then around the beginning of the year, after he had already left the Democratic Party, he said in his speech that he left the Democratic Party in October. And I'm assuming that's when he launched his independent campaign. But he, seems to have left the party full bore at this point, right? Now,
Right.
I will say, sorry, let me finish that last thought.
Sure. I was very long-winded. Go ahead.
Starting around the turn of the year, it seemed like things shifted. And he was beginning to pull more and more people from the conservative side of the aisle. When I was collecting signatures for Jill Stein in Idaho, I had more than one person tell me they were a Republican and that they were planning to go a different way this year, that they thought they were going to vote for Kennedy. So now, where his money's come from has been public for a long time, essentially, right? I mean, there's huge dark money super PACs also, but there was well known that right-wing billionaires were funding his campaign early on. And so I've had people in my circle say that he's been in the pocket for Trump and that he was going to drop out. And it, this sort of action to me lends some credence to that. In his speech, it was around the 17-minute mark, as he was ramping up for his reasons of why he was suspending his campaign, he was saying that, their polling showed that if he stayed in the race, he was going to give the presidency to Harris. That his staying in the swing states was going to flip the race for the Democrats, and he couldn't do that. And as you noted, he actively encouraged his supporters to vote for Trump. He's not quite joined the Trump campaign, I guess, but throughout that speech, he talked about looking forward to, working with President Trump to try to cure some of the ills that he said he was starting his campaign to confront.
And he did come out two nights ago, the same night he announced this. He came out at a rally with Trump and hugged him and spoke for him, and
spoke at a Trump rally. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
and I think Trump will probably try to act like that's his VP moving forward more than Vance. But
yeah, I bet. That's an interesting, and the RNC has happened, right? They've already chosen.
Yes.
Trump Vance. Yeah.
Yes. And there's certain states that I don't think Kennedy can get off the ballot, whether he would want to or not. So, yeah.
Well, he's said that he's not intending to get off the ballot, right? He talked about in his thing, like he's going to get off the ballot in about 10 states, he said. About 10 swing states. He's going to make sure he's not on the ballot so he doesn't give the election to the Democrats, which seems to me a pretty tacit admission that, hey, I mean, he said, vote for Trump. He said he supports Donald Trump. But it feels like a pretty tacit admission. That's sort of been his goal the whole time. I sort of suspect, and I was not willing to make this accusation while he was still running, but acting as a spoiler, trying to make sure the Democrats don't win this election, I think was very possibly his intention from the outcome. I mean, like at the very start, like when he was still running as a Democrat, he wanted to make sure that the Democrats were not going to beat a potential Donald Trump presidency.
And I think that's very likely, but I think it should be noted again that he reached out to the Harris campaign a few weeks ago and they ghosted him. They didn't respond to him. So he was looking for an in to get into their presidency, but he didn't have that chance.
Which, I guess that would be the most charitable interpretation of this whole thing, was that like he said in his speech, I forget the three things that he free speech, health and wellness, childhood disease, whatever, and maybe war were the things that he listed as the top three things.
Yeah, that's certainly what he talked about at the rally with Trump.
Okay,
that this man wants to end the wars and he wants to shatter the deep state and he wants to release all the files on presidential assassinations, not just his father and his uncle. But I thought, well, of course, Trump wants to, start a commission to look into presidential assassinations. He had one done on him. So,
yeah, I don't, I think Kennedy is either a tool or gullible if he thinks that Trump wants to do all the things that Kennedy claimed that he's going to give Trump the benefit of the doubt about. At the same time, it does strike me that Trump is more or less an isolationist, that he did not engage in as much imperialism and as much, plunder as the Democrats have during his term. I mean, I worried about ramping up a war with China. I worried about North Korea a fair bit during the Trump presidency. But I listened to Harris's acceptance speech, and she full on, I mean, her speech often felt like a nationalist rally in the same way Trump's do, breaking out into the whole chants of USA, USA. Her talking about how she wants to make sure that America will always have the strongest, best, most lethal fighting force in the world. Promising to go the distance. I don't think that was the word she used, but that she was sticking with Ukraine in the fight against Russia. Making sure that Israel would always have the means to defend itself. She full on promised to continue to fund Israel's genocide. She full on promised to continue to fight in Eastern Europe. And while I agree that Trump would likely continue the same, we will see no change in policies with regards to Israel and the Middle East under Trump or Harris.
No. Right. For sure.
I would give
Trump has business connections with places in China and Russia, so that's his motivation to be friendlier with them.
Right. And a Harris presidency, I fully believe that we will have U.S. boots on the ground in Ukraine. Like Ukraine has seen 400, 500,000 deaths. Russia has seen 100,000 plus deaths from this 2.5-year war now that's been going on there. And Democrats have zero desire to stop that. They will continue fighting. The automatic draft that they instituted, that they put tied into some other funding bill earlier this year to make registration for the draft automatic, felt to me a preparation for when we're going to start seeing the U.S. draft to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. They fully intend to make sure that Russia, China, the BRICS nation writ large, don't get a hold of all the resources that are underground in Eastern Europe. I think on this podcast we talked about the admission that some of the State Department people made about that this war is about resources, about the
Lindsey Graham being one of the biggest ones, that just was like, hey, do you want to give all that wealth to Russia? I don't.
So, and I don't even know that Donald Trump won't support broader war in the Middle East, but I don't know that he will. I think that he will do nothing to rein in the atrocities being committed by Israel. I think he will continue to egg them on. I think that, reporting has come out that he called up Netanyahu and asked Netanyahu not to agree to any ceasefire until after the election, because he doesn't want to give Democrats the credit for having a ceasefire before the election. And that's horrible, but we all know Donald is in it for him, right? It's not, he cares nothing about anyone else, frankly. But I have no sense that he's also looking for a wider war in Iran. He might be, but I know that Democrats have been spoiling for a war with Iran for decades at this point. Like the Clinton cabal absolutely wants us to have war in Iran. And if Israel can goad the U.S. into getting involved in a wider war before the election, they would love to have U.S. boots and more warships in the Middle East to help fight Iran and in Syria and anywhere else that they feel like, Egypt is not, we're not hostile with Egypt like we're hostile with Iran, but Israel would love us to be fighting against all their neighbors, frankly, so that they can consolidate all the land that is currently occupied, and they can make the entire region Israel. Like Israel wants a larger nation that is the entirety of historic Palestine on the maps. So I don't know. Trump might not be quite spoiling for the larger war in the Middle East. I feel confident Trump would step down hostilities in Ukraine. He will do everything in his power to make sure that he is a dictator here. Like we will see political violence spring up across the country again. There will be more federal execution squads like we had killing protesters previous. I mean, I don't want anyone to get the idea that I think Trump is going to be a good time. I think the next Trump presidency, if it happens, and it's up in the air at this point, as far as I'm concerned. It's, Kennedy said that his internal polling showed it in a dead heat, 269 to 269, I think he said. That the Harris Trump campaigns were tied. He also said that he has a chance in a contingent election, which is ridiculous.
Ridiculous. Yeah, he really likes to look at the numbers to anything that would help him believe his own thoughts about how if only everything had gone his way, then there'd be no chance he'd win in a landslide. It's like, no, of course not. If he had been able to challenge in a truly open primary the Democrat side and actually had run trying to get the Democrats to endorse him, maybe. But as you and I both know, the two parties are firmly in control of this country, and if you're not championed by one of those, you really don't have a shot.
You really don't. Which is not to say I think you shouldn't try. In fact,
No.
I think that Kennedy's cowardice, and I think that's either he's bought and paid for, either he has been a Trump operative the whole time, or he's just a coward and has become bought off by the big interests finally. One side.
Well,
or the other.
his VP choice really made me wonder quite a bit, and ultimately, he's another example of a person that maybe in the early part of their life was leaning more towards the left's policies and politics, but in the last 10 years or so of his life, as he's reached 70, he's more and more on the conservative side of those things. And some of it you can tell it's just that he took different positions from the Democrats, and the Democrats tried to destroy him over it, and now it seems personal to him that he's just taking these stances further. But I don't disagree with you. I think that Donald Trump, for the most part, is like giving, I don't know what the analogy would be. He's not the one that's fully in charge of anything, and he doesn't know enough about the power that he wields in the presidency to be responsible whether or not we stay in wars or get out of them. And I think that, when this country has been in 8 or 9 conflicts at once for decades now, how many of those did he end when he was president? None. He did attempt to get out of Afghanistan, and it ended up being Biden's administration that saw that through. But I think that was just, it had run its course, and it was going to happen no matter who was president, as we saw. And I think that, yeah, you can give him the props for not starting anything new. But again, the people that he was interested, or that he could have had a chance to start a war with, are interests that he already, aligns with outside of the presidency. So like China and Russia. And I think that he was serious about going to some type of upscale war with North Korea, but he called Kim Jong-un's bluff, and Kim Jong-un went, okay, this guy's crazy enough that he's not going to continue to play this back and forth with me. I better actually reach an agreement with him. Because anybody that's looked into that particular situation knows that North Korea is heavily influenced by China and what they want them to do. And it's kind of like a proxy to mess with us. It's not China outright, but it's China saying, yeah, we'll give you some of what you need so you can continue to be a scary thing for the United States rather than people focusing on us. But yeah, Donald Trump is an opportunist and a person who, I think that he's aligned with Israel's policies for quite some time. So I don't really see him making them change their behavior. And I don't know if Kamala would do that either, but I do think that she has insinuated that she would handle it differently if she had been in Biden's shoes. Time will tell. Right now she can't really talk outside of the administration she's currently in. But I have very little expectation that whether it's an R next to your name or a D next to your name, that the American empire will change its course.
No, and I can't. When we're talking about politicians on the national stage, I just don't trust Democrats at all at this point. Like, they if they are talking about violence they want to control, if they're talking about imperialist adventuring, then sure, I believe them. Like when Kamala says that she will make sure that Israel always has the means to defend themselves, I believe that. When Kamala says that under her administration, they'll make sure that we stay the course in Ukraine, I believe that. When Kamala says that they want to have the largest, best funded, most deadliest military in the world, I believe that that's something she wants. When Kamala says that she will pass a law restoring Roe versus Wade, that's just a fucking blatant lie. Like, how can she do that? That's not a thing that she can pass by presidential proxy. You need a Congress. You've got a Congress that is against that. Frankly, anytime Democrats claim they want to help working people, which they claim less and less frequently these days. Like she does claim that she was going to, give a middle class tax cut. And that she might do. I mean, I think how Democrats define middle class has changed significantly. I think as Democrats,
you have to, otherwise it doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
If you take the old definition, it's not there.
As far as they're concerned, the middle class are those people who make $25 million a year or less, up to a couple $100,000 a year, right? Like if you make $250,000 a year to $25 million a year, then you're middle class. That's just damn few Americans. I mean, not damn few. There's probably hundreds of thousands who make it in that category.
Sure. In a country of 330 million people. Sure. Hundreds of thousands, I believe.
But it's not the majority of Americans. It's just the majority of their donors, funders. Like that's the comfortable class. My friend Michael Hines made this analogy to me a couple of years ago that America, I can't remember exactly how he put it. He was talking about slavery and how in his mind it never ended, but rather the plantation just globalized. And so it was easier to see, it was easier to pretend that slavery had ended because most of the field slaves had found themselves, they were now people of color across the world, as opposed to actually in the field outside the plantation, and that America was the plantation, and that we had a huge class of people here that would rather hold the whip than feel the lash, is how he put it. People that were willing to brutalize, it's the entire police state in America. People who are willing to brutalize their neighbors, as long as they're the ones who get to wield the violence, as long as they feel they will be protected. And whether it's the police state or the administrative state or the political class that's making millions of dollars from insider trading, like all of those people are part of the system. They're just the part that is capturing the vast majority of us and making sure that we can't rise up against them.
Well, and if there's anything I've learned in my life is that what is slavery but an extreme exploitation of work of the workers, and most prosperous American businesses today exploit their workers every single day.
Every chance they can get.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bug, it's a feature of the way that capitalism and business works. And so we're really stuck under that mentality, and we have been for a very long time, but I think our government was bought and paid for by these people decades ago and fused into a partnership with the mafia and the for lack of a better way of putting it, the deep state, the organizations like the CIA that their job is to maintain American empire and American opportunity in wealth and in resources, which is usually also wealth. I think that both parties. You say that you have a hard time believing Democrats, and I agree. I have a hard time believing Republicans as well. So where do we go? Where do we look? Because I do believe that some of their most extreme rhetoric is exactly what they want to do. And often when you listen to people talk and talk and talk, they'll let out what they're thinking, what they really want to do over a long enough period of time. And Donald Trump, if the Democrats truly want to bring Roe v. Wade back or some version of it, then they're going to need to play a longer game and install the proper Supreme Court justices that they would need to bring that back. And either that or take a majority in both houses of Congress and pass a law that way. But it's pretty hard nowadays to gain full control of that institution for either side. The last several elections have been pretty tight, where if you won the House or the Senate, you've won by a couple seats.
Right.
So
yeah, I would say I don't believe Republicans. I believe Republicans because what I hear from them mostly is how they want to cut taxes, how they want to end unions, how they want to end diversity, equity, inclusion, how they want to, like, I believe, like with the Democrats, I guess, I believe them when they say the bad shit. I don't believe them when they say that they want to rein in spending, because they clearly don't. They never have.
No.
I don't believe them.
They only say that when Democrats are in charge of the purse.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't believe them when they're, that they're in any way a populist party, that they are any way looking out for working class Americans. They're not. They just have a segment of rural white working class voters that they have brainwashed to the degree that those people are willing to vote against their interests based on feels, right? Based on vibes, that somehow Republicans have convinced them that they're, and not somehow, through real clear media programming. RFK, to keep this centered on him for another hot second, complained about how mainstream media is in the pocket of the Democratic Party. And I agree, a lot of it is, frankly. But more importantly, it's in the pocket of big business. And since the Democratic Party is in the pocket of business, they're there looking out for the Democrats as well as looking out for the Republicans. But the Fox News clearly programming Republicans, but CNN and MSNBC even more so, clearly programming the Democrats. So there are damn few. We don't have we started talking this podcast started talking about the estates, right? The first, second, third estates, the church, the aristocracy, and the people, and how we came up with the fourth estate, the press, in theory to help keep the other estates in check, and how the aristocracy has completely corrupted and co-opted the fourth estate. The church is really not a factor anymore, other than a virtue signaling organ that helps give power to the aristocracy, when they want it. So yeah, we would need a restoration of the fourth estate. Like, we would need laws passed, the things that Clinton, Obama, maybe Reagan as well. Like, we're slowly dismantled those institutions that by law had to hew to the truth, and that weren't allowed to, use propaganda on the American people, like things when we had actual news. We would need some sort of restoration of that. Like, even public broadcasting these days is now owned by private corporations, and you can hear the partisan bias or the pro-capitalist bias throughout any sort of PBS, public broadcasting happening as well these days. So we would need a return to true, nonpartisan, unbiased funding and reporting, a protection of that fourth estate. I think to start breaking free of this propaganda, or people to just check off altogether. And we're such a connected society these days. It's hard to sign off from these devices writ large. It's hard to
it's designed that way.
Designed that way. You have to participate. I'm going to step away from my hate of politics for just a second. Probably should have done this in the intro period, but I was curious enough about the live stream that I hopped right in. So hey, if you're out there listening, like, subscribe, follow us on the socials. I'm not going to pimp the Patreon until I find time to go back there again.
Yeah.
Who knows? People might have been on Patreon. I do occasionally. I try to once a week get on the Twitter anyway. So Rise Up W Mark on Twitter, or at Rise Up W Mark on Twitter. But mostly wherever you listen to your live streams, wherever you listen to your podcasts, rate us, subscribe, share it with your friends. And I bring that up because I'm going to call out a follower. We got Amy Lazert out there, who is a follower. And I say that because this is a person I know. I had my first experience where I was at work, and I was talking to some new faculty. And as I left, a faculty member walked by and said, "Mark, I listened to your podcast."
Oh, well.
Found me through one of the, she was a supporter of Sonatina Sanchez, one of the city council candidates that we interviewed.
Nice.
And read about us in Sonatina's newsletter. And it's like, whoa, that must be a different Marc Mixon. But she looked us up, and sure enough, it was not a different Marc Mixon. So Amy, thank you for listening, and welcome to the podcast. And as we get another, when I hear word of another street medic training, I will make sure to hit you up so you can attend that as well.
Nice.
So yeah, those of you who are out there listening, I encourage you to share the podcast, share us with your friends, rate us highly. It was a new experience for me, having someone walk up and say, "Hey, I listened to your podcast." So
Yeah,
I
it's
just
pretty
wanted
interesting
to.
when that happens. I had that happen with my Cavs podcast back in the day. Like I'd have some people every once in a while go, "Hey, I ran into this. Is this you?" I'm like, "Yeah." So
It was an odd experience,
yeah.
but I'm glad
Well,
people are listening.
and yeah, it's nice that we're building a fan base over time. We like talking to each other about this, but the goal of putting it out there is for others to listen. And I think that really the strongest part of this show is when we get to interview people that are on the ground doing the various works that we highlight here on the show. So, like this last episode we posted last week about street medics, that was something I just don't see being discussed in other podcasts. So,
Right.
and I have to say, I also heard a good way of saying Twitter. You can call it X Twitter
X Twitter.
because because it is X Twitter, but it also is called X. Never in the history of anything has a rebranding gone so poorly.
So
Uh,
poorly.
Everybody just still
Funny
calls it
about
Twitter.
that, if you look through the podcast's emails, uh, we get updates from
Mm,
Twitter, right? And
yeah.
going up until about April or May, it was from Twitter. And then for like May, June, July, it said X, and then in parentheses, formerly Twitter. And now it says Twitter again when the updates come in.
Well, it's like, they still say tweet. It's just like it's just awful.
It is it's pretty pitiful. It's pretty pitiful. Never in the history of rebranding. I think that is a great way of saying that.
Right. But to get back to the factory of sadness that is our politics, we can talk a
Yes.
little bit more about, you know, I know for me, I caught a little bit of the RNC, I caught a little bit of the DNC, mostly because there were certain people I wanted to hear their speeches. And it was usually like the VP candidates or Trump or Harris, that was really about all that drew me there. And I just couldn't help but feel like there are so many aspects to our political environment that are old hat. That why are they still doing it this way? Like why do they even broadcast every night of the DNC convention? That's for the people there. That's why it's such a spectacle. And the
Right.
RNC as well. It's a spectacle like going to a basketball game or something, like it's entertaining, it's exciting, there's cheering, there's chanting, there's signs, there's all this stuff that you do at a sporting event. And yes, we live stream those events, but at the end of the day, like how many smiley assholes do I need to see go up in front of the country at a lectern and preach about why their party's so great and why they're the party of hope or change or blah 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 blah. And it's as old hat to me as seeing these debates where they dress in suits and talk about the country. It almost feels like it's a sliver out of time that somehow still exists. you know and I don't think that it speaks that well to the American people. And I think ultimately there's too many other things to engage in that show me what matters, but then leave all the rest to the people that are there experiencing it. Or maybe you don't even really have these big party conventions anymore. I mean, was there any doubt that Trump was going to be the nominee this year, or that then the Democrats replaced Biden and just put Kamala in place? Like, these things are not even up to us anymore. It's just,
Right.
hey, everybody, show up and vote for the slop we've given you. Like it's not.
Well, and the Democratic convention anyway was expressly just a formality. Like the DNC did go ahead and have their virtual roll call vote the first week of August to make sure that they were going to hit Ohio's deadline. So Kamala was already the nominee before the DNC started. Like she was the official nominee. The Democratic National Committee had voted on it. Kamala was like by August 5th or August 7th, Kamala was the candidate. Um, So yeah, the DNC was an express formality, and you're right, the RNC was also a formality. Like there was no one else. I mean, and in theory, now it's interesting about these conventions because I um, attended parts of the Green Party convention. I didn't see any of the RNC. I only saw Harris's acceptance speech of the DNC. But even the Green Party convention was really essentially a formality because their rules, there's no room for delegates to vote any way other than how their states send them. I think there was a single faithless delegate. I don't know this for sure, but I sort of feel like Davi's campaign manager was a delegate and went ahead and voted for Davi, even though he was directed to vote for someone else.
Interesting.
I won't swear to that. I would have to go look at the votes again, but I feel like there was one faithless elector, so to speak, right? But the Green Party bylaws, like they have proportional representation, and depending on how your state votes, if your state voted 70% for Stein and 20% for Jasmine and 10% for Davi, then the number of delegates that they send to the convention, that's the number they send. And those delegates are not supposed to have any leeway to vote differently. Like if you were a delegate who was sent there to represent Sherman, you are supposed to vote for Sherman when you hit the convention. Which, why have the convention? I mean, the Green Party has their annual national meeting where they, it's a rally where they're trying to get people interested, where they've got speakers, et cetera, and that's great. Some workshops, some speakers, but a convention should be where candidates are being decided and chosen. And if you're not having that happen, what's the point at that point, right? And so what's the point if the Green Party bylaws are such that when you get a certain number of delegates, and this is modeled to a degree after how the Democrats and Republicans do it as well, right? You have so many delegates, and those delegates are supposed to vote for, they're committed to, say, Biden, they're committed to Trump, they're whatever. Then why have the convention? Like it's a formality at that point. When you get the right number of delegates, you are the party's candidate, and that's just the way it goes. And that's other than to maintain the aura like the sporting event, right? Like that politics is a team sport, and you want to get your fans all worked up and excited. And so you want to have a pep rally for your fans. And that's essentially, the DNC was a big pep rally for the Democratic candidates who are running in November. And it was as much a dog and pony show as, I watched that Kennedy speech at the Trump rally, and and when Trump introduced him, to thunderous applause, right? And then Kennedy walks on to the, There Goes My Hero song, and the pyro goes off. And
I'm sure Dave Grohl loved that. Yeah.
It was it was like a concert, right? They had the big pyro pots shitting sparks, and and it was it's a sad state of our political affairs, I have to say, where our politics have devolved to pep rallies and pro forma sort of exercises because the powers that be make those decisions. This is why, frankly, I am in favor of small d democracy, because I think that these decisions should be made by everyday people. And I think that elected officials should be everyday people. I think that governance should happen by us, not by them. And the them in this case is the aristocracy. It's
Right.
the rich, the powerful, the ones who make all the decisions in our society, and they make them for their benefit. And it's time that we, the people, make decisions for us, for our communities, for our own betterment, and take that power from the aristocracy, if at all possible.
Well, and it also, it just goes, like you said, it's performative, it's entertainment, and the same thing has happened to our news media. That it's no longer about disseminating information that is relevant to the election or to what the country is facing. It's just all about the spectacle and trying to get clicks and views and, hey, hey, look over here, um and a lot of it is, think of all the Trump rallies that have been televised, especially when he ran the first time, and they would keep a camera on the lectern for 45 minutes waiting for him to come out. It's just, can you imagine a world where if we had had television during the Gettysburg Address, would that have given greater value to something like that, because we'd have it in video form that we could replay it over and over and over again? Or, are politicians supposed to be going to these communities and going across the country to speak, because it really is a face-to-face best way of communicating with someone, rather than all of these pre-rehearsed, pre-recorded spectacles that we're putting up all the time. And like you mentioned before, our news media, when these people get sued nowadays, this stuff is just considered entertainment. They go, oh, well, we're not a
Right.
news channel, we're an entertainment channel. And people don't realize that long ago we lost the battle to being entertained rather than informed.
God, I hate to do it after that, but speaking of the, playing for the clicks and the likes, since this is a live stream, smash that like button.
Smash that like button. Speaking of, and that's the other thing too. Like, was the media more skewed left before Fox News? Certainly. But I think that journalistic integrity and the fact that it came from beat reporting and it came out of uh, newspapers and things like that, it was more small L liberal than big L liberal. And I would make the argument that everything went off the rails when Fox News was created, and we became a country that was more about finding the other side's opinion more palatable, simply because it's from the other side. It's from the team I root for. And it just devolved further and further from there until one day it's, people screaming at each other on TV. And, at least in the beginning of Fox News, they would bring on Democrats. They try to have debate. They try to talk about, what the differences were. But over time, it just became, well, our audience only wants to hear from people on the right. And then what did CNN and MSNBC and places like that decide? Well, we should now be the counterpoint to that, just the opposite of that,
Right.
where it's an environment for people on the left to come and only hear what they want to hear.
And Fox News was obviously, they were the path breakers in making propagandized entertainment sort of the norm, right? They were the ones who led that. Yeah, maybe the media
24-hour news
tended,
cycles and yep.
right. Well, Ted Turner, CNN did the 24-hour news and sort of made news entertainment, but didn't make
Sure.
news entertainment in the way that, in the same propagandized way, right?
Right.
There was the CNN, I think they led the path with "if it bleeds, it leads" sort of thing, right? Like a culture of fear and catastrophe and everything being bad, sure, and publicizing that. But Fox News really started making opinion pieces the entertainment, and the opinions were, I gave an opinion somewhere on Twitter that, when we saw the first Trump presidency, I'm trying to remember exactly what I said, and I'm not going to quite get it, but we were watching a behind the scenes battle between two groups of oligarchs, right? There was the Koch brothers cohort that wanted to slowly take over all of our enterprises and slowly bleed the people of their wealth as well as autonomy and power. And then we had the Murdoch crowd who felt like we'd already done enough, that the media had sufficiently brainwashed people that they didn't need to play it slow anymore, that they could just go ahead and blatantly do things in the open and it would be fine. And the Murdoch people, won that. I'd say that the Democrats, if anything, are still playing the Koch brothers game as opposed to the Murdoch game. Like they're still lying to their constituents and trying to slow play it a little bit. It's also, they play the good cop in the good cop, bad cop sort of way to beat us, the American people, down. Oh dear. All right. So
yeah. Why didn't we do a podcast about movie reviews or something? No, I'm just kidding.
Right. Well, I don't watch many movies anymore. And when I do, I don't know. Yeah, I don't really watch many movies anymore. I couldn't give movie reviews.
Yeah.
I watch old content.
I watch more old content than new content because the old content is pretty good. The newer content nowadays is we forgot how to make movies.
Oh, we got what do I have, a screening coming up? Hundreds of Beavers. Have you seen Hundreds of Beavers?
No. That sounds like it could be dirty or it could be informative or both. I don't know what's that about.
It's neither. It is if it's the thing that I watched. I know I got to type in Hundreds of Beavers because I want to make sure that it's the right thing. Yeah, that's the right thing.
Hundreds of Beavers.
Yeah, it's I got a screening of that coming up here in a couple of weeks at the college. It is just, I don't even know how to describe it. Like Hundreds of Beavers, picture hundreds of people in beaver costumes pretending to be a lumberjack, 1800s lumberjack.
Yeah. I'm seeing a picture of it now. I'm seeing the poster. Hundreds of Beavers. Exists at the crossroads of Looney Tunes, Benny Hill, Cannibal the Musical, and Blazing Saddles. Okay.
It is it's original, if anything. I'll give it that.
Yeah.
It's
there's an official website. I'll check this out. Hundreds of Beavers.
Something about it reminds me of that Adult Swim Too Many Chef. I don't know if you saw that. The old.
Yeah, no, it says that it is in kind of a vein of an Adult Swim creation. So, hey, good on a person that would make something a little more abstract and low budget. Because I was just having a conversation with my girlfriend today about AI coming for everything, and that she would just want to end her life if she couldn't have the same opportunities moving forward because everything will just be done by AI. And I said, well, in my head, it may create a bunch of underground scenes within the art world. So like, mainstream music, mainstream cinema, all of that might be completely taken over by this crap because it serves the self-interests of the people that run those industries. But I think there'll be an outcry for something underneath all of that, something that's still human driven and still, at the essence of what those art forms are supposed to be. So just like grunge was popular, it wasn't called grunge when it was coming up, but it was a popular form of music in a local area that took hold over time. I think that there'll still be opportunities to do things. It'll just be, you can't necessarily get insanely rich off of it anymore. It's just
Right.
art will go
No,
back to, you do art because it satisfies you, not because you're trying to, get rich off of it.
And when your art is worth a lot of money, will be after you're long dead, and you will not.
Yeah,
you
which
will
is the
not
way
see
it was for a
proceeds
long
of this.
time. That's the way it used to be. Yeah.
You will have a patron who will pay you for stuff because they particularly like it, and or you will just be brilliant, and someone will eventually discover you long after you've died. Sometimes I miss art.
Yeah, you're a pretty artistic guy.
Yeah, I miss that sort of carefree, like creating a thing being the concern. Yeah, really consciously gave up any sort of artistic pursuits after Trump was elected. I just felt like
Yeah.
every ounce of energy I put into creating art was just wasting my time and whistling in the dark, and like it was, sure, maybe it was doing a thing that got me off a little bit, but the world was fucking burning, and every minute I spent pretending, making myself happy while the world burned was just adding to the problems. So I had to start doing things that, maybe are not more beneficial, but
Right.
I think they're more beneficial.
There's a part of me that I do get into certain things that they're topics that are not as important to our daily lives. And I think, well, how is this the best use of my time? But occasionally I need that kind of outlet to just get away from the madness. But I often wonder, how can my art promote, larger, more culturally relevant topics? Even last night I was talking to my friend Colin about all this political shit, and he was saying, did you see JD Vance? They did a video of him going into a local ice cream shop, or no, local donut shop, and he ordered some donuts, and it basically, we came to the conclusion that it sounds like, what if a semi-racist automaton was attempting to, pass off as a human, walking into a store to go, hello, I would like some of your donuts. Like it felt like the real life situation was a wannabe SNL skit, and that's so much of what we face in the political world just feels like it's a joke. It should be a joke. It'd be better received that way.
And I want to go back to, like, I do think that real in-person organizing, like if politicians, if you look at the last, even big rallies are a pale comparison of this. Like Trump does all these big rallies, but Bernie, before his rallies got big, right, he was out there doing his talks to 20 or 30 people, right? And they got to be big rallies. I think that, truthfully, as close to one-on-one conversations are truly the way to change minds. Like in-person organizing, knocking doors, talking to neighbors, talking to neighborhoods, things that politicians don't do anymore. But that is what the desire is there for. And instead, we have the big rallies, the big media circuses, the pep rallies, essentially, because it gets people to disengage. Like it's just entertainment. So you buy your ticket or you watch on the news and you go and you scream and you cheer and you have a good time looking at your celebrity do whatever it is your celebrity does, whether that is singing the song or bounce the ball or demonize the opponent. Like it is, you watch your celebrity do the celebrity shtick, and you scream and cheer, and you wear the colors, and you paint your face, and you carry the sign, and then you go home and you disengage and slave away for the corporate machine some more, rather than having people who will engage you in actual conversation about, hey, this is a problem, this is where things have gone wrong, and here's how we can work to fix it. And that's what politics ought to be, is engaging with people about the problems that we've are facing and how we can fix them. And corporate politics still pretends that that's the game. They certainly mention the things that are wrong, but they do it as part of the infotainment, the scaretainment, whatever we want to call it. Feartainment, I like that one. Like, it's a way to demonize. Like, here's, oh, I'll use RFK since we started with him. Like, we are the most poisoned people in the world. And I don't even disagree with him on that. And then the culprits, though, that he brings up are not necessarily all the culprits. Is there corruption in regulatory agencies? Sure, there's some corruption in regulatory agencies.
Right.
Is that
but who's corrupting them? Like,
exactly. Right?
Is it the regulatory agency that truly needs to be adjusted, or is it the corporate,
the gigantic corporate entities that will do anything for a profit? Like, I used to subscribe to an annual book newsletter, not a newsletter, it was a book. I forget the place put out, but it was called The State of the World, right? And then every year they'd put out a book that was the State of the World for 2000. And that's the one that sticks in my head. Because, in the State of the World 2000, I remember reading this shit, that at that time, there was over 100 chemicals in the body of every human being on Earth that did not exist 50 years prior. In 2000, there was 100 chemicals, and it did not matter how remote you were. You could be a tribe in a jungle that had no contact with modern society in your entire lifetime, and yet your body still was a reservoir for these persistent chemicals that had not existed in 1950. And what is the long-term effect of those chemicals? We don't know. Like, there's no, if they didn't exist 50 years ago, there cannot be a longitudinal study. You cannot tell what happens over time because they haven't been around that long.
Yeah, so you just need more time. And you're not going to know now. Our ancestors
we are
will know.
The most poisoned society, and you don't fix that by ending regulation, Bobby. You don't fix the fact that we're all poisoned by just going ahead and letting the corporate entities do whatever they fucking want. You need more regulatory bodies. You need things that have teeth. You need to prioritize people's health over profit. People over profit.
The government has become the government has become a straw man, the one pointed to and responsible for all of these ills, and the corporations somehow never have a finger pointed their direction. When I think most Americans, when they really stop and think about it, what bidding does our government do every day? Is it for you and me, or is it for the corporations? Everything's already bought and paid for, bought and sold off. And I love how the Republicans often will talk about, because they're more open about their support of corporations, not that both parties aren't behind the scenes, because they kind of are equal that way. But Republicans talk a lot about how more things should be privatized and put in the hands of businesses and business owners, because they can do a better job than the government. What proof is there of that? Where? Whenever they deregulate something, it just ends up becoming a nightmare, or even this concept of cutting taxes. Whose taxes? What taxes? If anything, we don't pay enough taxes across the board to be able to fund the country that we have. Right. That was traditionally how we paid for things, was that everybody chipped in. And in an age where you can be a multi-billionaire and own your own space agency, and a lot of that is subsidized by the American people, and you don't even have to put your own money in it, we lost the plot a long time ago. A company like Edison's company can not pay taxes for 20 years, even though they're the richest company in the country. And then the things like corporations or people and shit like that. Like, I don't know how people don't point the finger to business, to the privatization we've already endured, and the fact that what ultimately is a lobbyist. It's just that's privatization entering the government and it's there for its own intentions. It's not there for you. It's not there for me.
No, it is. That's the having the one-on-one conversation that. Uh-oh. I'll have to get back with them. And should have put my phone on silent. Sorry,
That's
listeners. Okay. It's that one-on-one conversation that politicians should be having with people, but instead they're having it with representatives of the wealthy and the corporate interests. And that is what, because the politicians, like access is influence, and the people the politicians talk to are the people that have the money. And thus those people, those lobbyists write our laws. And it is, it's gone way downhill. And only by engaging do we have any chance of fixing it, right? You want to change the world, like, it'd be great if we went to the 90% tax rate that we had in the 40s or 50s for the ultra wealthy. But even if you just took what the tax rate you and I pay, and I don't even know what that is, 20, 24%, something like that is the income tax. And you just made it that across the board for all people and corporate entities, for all income and capital gains annually. That you couldn't get away from having to pay your fair share by saying, well, no, I don't actually get a salary. I don't have an income. I just have investments and they have a capital return every year. Well, great. We'll tax that capital return at the same rate that we tax. Like if all those multi-billionaires suddenly had to pay 20% of whatever their increase was, like over the pandemic, they doubled their wealth. 20% of that doubling of wealth each year would have funded health care for everyone. It would have funded housing for everyone. It would have funded huge swaths of social good that instead we're letting people die in the streets. And we have the death panels that the conservatives warned about when we were talking about Medicare for all. Oh, how are we going to avoid the death panels? You mean the death panels that private insurance companies engage in now and deciding who deserves to live and who's cost effective enough to save? All right.
And movies were being made about that in the 80s and 90s, so I mean that's always been their intention. Of how do we make a ton of money and not have to give it back, and really I think the thing I've thought for many years now is it's kind of fucked up to be within a system that prints money and sends it out and then has to beg and squat, and get down on their knees and do all the bidding for these people that got the money to get it back into the system so that we can use it for the people, for the country.
Yep. Well, we have been going for an hour and 15-ish now on this live stream edition of Rise Up with Marc Mixon. We started a little late due to some technical difficulties, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up with the call to action. Whether Bobby Kennedy was an op to begin with or just sold out to the corporate establishment that gave him the biggest money, or like whatever reason he came down on the Republican side rather than the Democrat, I personally think he was probably an op from the beginning, that he was there to try to keep the Democrats from winning, and that the internal polling showed he was now pulling more votes from Republicans, and Harris was suddenly far more popular. And so they needed to ameliorate that. They needed to go ahead and say, okay, Bobby, you have to drop out so we can make sure that Trump gets those votes. But whichever way, they're not representing us. I don't care what your political stripes are, frankly. They are not, like, if you believe that the corporate establishment of either party represents you, you have been brainwashed. You have bought into the shtick. You are blinded by the team sports that they have made politics. They do not, unless your income is in the 7 or 8 figure range, they do not represent you. Full stop. They use you, They lie to you. They don't represent you. If you want to be represented in this system, you have to get involved. I say it all the time. Democracy is not a spectator sport. You need to get organizing for the things you believe in, and you need to find a way to get out there and try to make a difference in the world. There are people working on the issues right now. They are not going to have big celebrity names. They are not going to have tons of money, but they are going to be spending their real time trying to make a difference. And if you want things to change, they will only change with your participation. They will only change with your work and dedication. There is no one coming to save us. Yeah, I don't care what their name is. There is no big celebrity. There is no wealthy corporation. There is no one who's going to change things in favor of us. They just don't exist. It's got to be us. There's a saying in the sort of anarchist circles I travel in: we protect us. And that's the deal. Like, we have to be the ones that are going to make the change. We have to be the ones to do the work. We have to be the ones to sacrifice and spend and save and work, because no one else is going to, because they don't look out for us. So,
and there's a lot more of us than them.
There is a lot more of us than them. Still, hundreds of millions more of us than them. That's why they spend billions of dollars every year to keep us divided and distracted and angry and separate and too busy to organize and unify. So we need to get together, and I challenge you to do that. I encourage you to do that, and I invite you to work with us to help start getting that done. If you are doing the work and you'd like to have a platform, I invite you to come on the show. Email us at riseupwmark@gmail.com. Post comments in the chats. We will highlight you. We will get the word out for you. If you know people who are doing the real work, put us in touch with them, and come on, join the conversation. We can't do this alone. It's going to take as many of us who are willing to get out there and do the work. Anyone who feels like shit is going wrong, you're right. It's going wrong. And it's going wrong because we are allowing those assholes to fucking control this conversation. But we can fight back. If we couldn't, they wouldn't. If we couldn't change things, they wouldn't spend all their money trying to stop us from doing it. So get involved, get busy, join us, and let's rise up. All right. Thank you all.
And if you like what you've heard and you're new to our show, I've seen our numbers go up and down in today's live stream. So I know people have joined in. Right now we have probably 6 or 7 people listening. Check us out on all the major platforms for podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all that. Typically we do interviews with local people on the ground that whether they're running for an office or they're a part of a party or that they're doing work like our last episode last week about street medics. We're here to give a voice to the people and to create a space where people can come and talk about the works that they're doing to make that change. So please check us out.
Absolutely. Yep. Next week, we're going to be back with some more local activists and organizers working on social housing here in Seattle. So make sure you check out next week when we're going to be talking with someone from House Our Neighbors.
Yeah, we'll see if we can live stream that episode to YouTube and Rumble and continue to do more live streams.
All right. Well, thank you, Adam. Thank you for joining me today. As always, out there in the wider world, thank you for listening.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Some answers, a little bit of truth. Some answers, a little bit of truth.